Welcome back to News Talk. As D.C. police continue their efforts to put the brakes on the city's crime spike, one question looms large. Why are there so many illegal firearms on the streets of the nation's capital? And what can authorities do to stem the flow? Reporter Jennifer Donnellan has been digging into this question. She has a special report coming up at 11 o'clock tonight on our sister station, ABC 7. Joining us now with a preview. Great to have you here. Thanks very much.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Such an important issue, and it's one that has, while the numbers that we're seeing this year in D.C. and in other big cities are alarming, and they've grabbed a lot of headlines, this issue of guns, given that there are no gun manufacturing facilities, plants, if you will, in the District of Columbia,
right.
The issue of where do these guns come from is big, but it is not new.
No, it's big and it's not new. You know, the fact of the matter, you're mentioning the homicide rate. We are the highest it's been in 5 years. We are at latest numbers are 136 people who have been killed this year. The year's not over. Those numbers keep going up. The last time we saw this type of number was in 2010. We were at 132 murders. And the bulk of these murders are all being committed with illegal guns. So, you know, it is a complicated question. It's a simple question, complicated answer. Mm-hmm. And it's one that, you know, we met with grieving families, and, you know, they all want to know the answer to that. So we sat down with the ATF. You're looking at some video right now, actually, where we spent some time with the Department of Forensic Sciences. They have a new agency director, Dr. Jennifer Smith. She was a 23-year veteran of the FBI. She's been tasked with coming in and cleaning that place up. She's been in place since July. She oversaw DNA analysis at the FBI. She says, listen, I know we have some improving to do. We have a high volume of crime right now. This summer, you know, stuff was just coming in left and right, so they're trying to get ahead of that. But that is the race to trace the weapons. They need to track those weapons to the places, people, and violent events. So, you know, and that takes time. But that can help detectives. We met with the ATF, and the ATF's basically telling us that Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina, that is where the guns are coming from that they are finding on the streets of D.C., and they're finding all kinds of guns, scary, scary stuff, scary firepower out there on the streets. You know, in talking with D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier, you know, her biggest concern is not biggest concern, but one of the main things that she's been trying to tackle this whole year is who's got the guns. And she has brought up time and time again that they're ending up in the hands of repeat violent offenders. And so, you know, I spoke with some sources, and we were able to get some numbers, and of the more than 70 people arrested this year for murder, nearly 1/3 of them were under court supervision at the time they allegedly picked up that gun and shot and killed someone. We reached out to CSOSA, which is Court Services and Supervisory Agency here in D.C. They're the ones who do the probation, and they do the high-intensity supervised release. They're supposed to be watching these men and women. And, you know, we haven't gotten a response back. You know, I'm assuming that they're going to say they can't be on top of these people. But that is that's a major concern, and I think that you'll hear police sources say a lot of times, you know, we go out, we lock these people up, and we turn around, and they're right back out on the street and committing more crime, and there's frustration.
How much legwork is involved in terms of going to the stores or the suppliers, whomever they may be, in the places you mentioned, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, to try to retrace the steps? Once you've got a gun that police have apprehended from whoever committed a crime, from a crime scene, from an arrest, what have you, how far back through the process
are they going?
Are they able to get?
They're able to go as far back as they can. And I'll tell you this, what they're finding, the ATF, okay, now the ATF does their own operations. This is D.C. We've got like 10,000 police agencies. But the ATF does their own stuff, and they explain to us that through their data, they have found that the guns that they're seeing on D.C. streets are 10, 15 years old, at least. And those are the majority of the guns that they're finding. So these are guns that have been out and about for a while. These are not guns that were bought 2 days ago and end up at a murder scene or involved in a murder. These are guns that are being stolen. They say typically they see them coming through straw purchases, which is typically when somebody who's not allowed to buy a gun convinces somebody else to buy them a gun. You know, you might have a felon who convinces his girlfriend to go in, get the gun, bring me the gun, and then he goes and does his thing. You know, some of the most heartbreaking interviews we did with the special investigation that's coming up tonight at 11 o'clock is with the families. And I interviewed Patricia Owens. Her son, Kevin Owens, was killed. His killers, while they were looking for them, there was YouTube surveillance video that they released of these killers, and you can see them firing the guns. We later found out through some research that we did that one of the two men eventually arrested for killing her son he was a repeat violent offender on high-intensity supervised release, and is accused of killing her son. But here's some of what she had to say.
It's families that, once you take these kids' lives, do y'all not understand? Y'all are not just hurting them. Y'all hurting whole families.
And, you know, you talk to these mothers and these families, they have holes in their heart that will never be filled. And your heart just breaks for them. And, you know, I applaud them for coming on and talking about, you know, their situations, but they know that at the end of the day, whatever changes, it's not going to bring their sons back. You know, but we're talking about young guys out there, 20s, in their 20s who are being murdered, in their 20s who are being arrested for murder. And they're using guns. So the question is, how do we get the guns off the street? How do we stem that tide of them coming in? You know, D.C. Police has a gun recovery unit that's, from all accounts, is doing amazing work out there. So far, the D.C. Crime Lab has received more than 1,450 guns off streets this year alone. That's in 10 months, 11 months now. And they are trying their best to try and get all that stuff in the system. And
you mentioned the system. It strikes me there's an interesting contrast or a disconnect in terms of the public scrutiny of the different players in the process and our understanding of police work, of the prosecution part, of what judges are responsible for. We're in the grill of the police, Chief Lanier, the other leaders, etc., all the time.
Right.
We're wanting answers.
Right.
We're trying to get information. You know, they're sort of the go-to. They're the public face for the whole system that involves more than the police. I mean, the police are obviously huge, but the prosecutors are huge. The judges are huge.
They gotta keep them in.
And yet our understanding of what happens to cases as they move through the pipeline or what doesn't happen, and then you mentioned, of course, the agency that's involved with supervising people who may be, I guess, transitioning back or what have you. It feels like there are big holes in much of it,
Yes.
so that while police are always having to answer questions, and rightly so,
right.
it's broader than law enforcement.
And you know, I would say this, you know, in my nearly a decade of covering crime in D.C., the one observation that I can make knowledgeably is the fact that historically, or at least, you know, because of, you know, situations involving ongoing investigations, the folks that are the most difficult to talk to because they can't talk in most instances are the prosecutors and the judges. And those are the two areas that I think that right now probably require more attention. There are some questions that need to be posed, and I think we've got holes there. I think you've got groups of people who are saying, why are these offenders constantly back out on the streets? Why aren't they locked up? Again, simple question, complicated answer. But we need all the players at the table to answer those questions, and that includes the judges and the prosecutors.
The last thing maybe we can touch on, with not a ton of time left, but it's worth a moment of our time here. You keep hearing about different disputes that lead to violence. And when you hear that, for example, it was a dice game or some other thing where it just doesn't rise to the level of murder, if anything rises to the level of murder, you know, your heart breaks for the families and the victims, the other victims, the direct victims, all the more. Because why should a dispute over a dice game lead to any kind of violence?
D.C. is a tale of two cities. And, you know, it's maddening to me because if you go east of the river, they are living a completely different experience than, you know, the folks in Northwest or downtown D.C. where you see all this explosion of, you know, growth. You know, over there you've got guys who are like, I'm 16 and I'm still alive. I'm not sure if I'll make it to 21, but I mean, that's the thinking. And the fact that they feel that way, if this city in its entirety doesn't start listening to it and stops ignoring it because it's black on black crime or it's you know, it's in the project, so I don't care. You're going to see that we're going to keep losing lives. That's the bottom line.
Catch Jennifer Donelan's report in its entirety tonight at 11 p.m. on our sister station, ABC7. Great work. Thanks for being on this important topic, and thanks for coming in to talk to us
Thank you for talking about it. Absolutely.
Always happy to have you here. We will take a quick break. We're back to update the hour's top stories in the forecast, and then we'll talk about what's happening in Kentucky that could impact the Affordable Care Act. Keep it here.